Investor relations is a very simple thing, Mike. It's showing your shareholders that you care about them after you took their money.
What are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see in investor relations?
Oh, the biggest pitfall going right now, number one, nothing else even comes close, is that they don't consider the retail component as its own individual fund. And a lot of people would make the comment of, well, why do I spend so much time with this guy in Eugene, Oregon? He only owns 500 shares of the company. But that one guy in Eugene, Oregon might be connected with $200 million worth of the company.
In terms of how to build a community, how to interact with long-term holders over time, what are your recommendations there?
Pick up the phone and call them. I can't be any more upfront or straight about it. Public companies now, they're reviewed like restaurants. They're reviewed like hotels, where you have younger investors that all seem to run to Bitcoin. They all seem to run to tech. And everybody always said, oh, well, you're never going to get them interested in defense, or you're not going to get them interested in mining. They ran to Bitcoin because there was an incredible sense of community, and they could talk about everything that they wanted to talk about. And it's that sense of community. If you don't have that now, you're done.
Well, we're here today with Sean Tufford, who's an investor relations guru stationed up in Nova Scotia. He's got lots of experience in the capital markets, ranging from mining to biotech to even national defense deals. And we're bringing him here today to talk with us about what we can do to be better at investor relations. What is the best way to communicate in a safe way that's compliant with the regulators, that doesn't get the folks in trouble that are managing the company, and create a sense of community for the investors so any long-term holders can be part of the team. Because at the end of the day, management, we're fiduciaries for the shareholders. I'm a professional fiduciary, I'm a lawyer, and so every day I'm thinking about what's in the best interest of my clients. And it's a slightly different relationship with shareholders, obviously, but the fiduciary duties of loyalty, good faith and fair dealing, still apply. And I want to just thank you for coming, Sean. And if you could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and why you do it.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. It's our family business. Our general core business is we create a really good sense of community with various companies' shareholder bases. We find out who's still alive, who's still interested, who's still invested, and what are some of the things that they want to be able to share with the company. There's a really deep sense of community now, more than any other time in history, Mike. Like it's funny. Everybody always says, well, we're the most connected we've ever been in history, but in reality, from the feedback in that our company gets, people miss that human touch. They miss being able to call the company. They miss being able to reach the CEO. And you can have the greatest story in the world, but if the CEO doesn't return your phone calls, I wouldn't put a penny into it. And for the fun of it, a little while back, I called 100 different public companies to try to just talk with the investor relations department. Mike, only 2 of them called me back.
All right, so it's an epidemic, I guess, of great proportions when it comes to communicating with the shareholders. What do you think the reasons are for that? There's probably lots of non-nefarious reasons. For instance, I think the feedback I've heard from management and insiders and companies is they're afraid of saying something that isn't publicly available to the rest of the shareholders. So for instance, they're afraid they may misstep and make a forward-looking statement, and they just have a real phobia of the regulators. What would you advise that management does to basically mitigate that perceived risk, which is a real risk?
Well, for starters, I don't know if it's so much a worry about people talking to the regulators as you might think. The reality of it is that you're only allowed to share what's in the public domain anyhow. Where the risk comes from now, and I don't think the IR people or the CEOs or that, I don't think that they're so much worried about disclosing something that they shouldn't. I think what they're worried about is somebody taking their words, regurgitating it on Twitter or some other social media. That's what they're more concerned about than anything. The key is you got to figure, including this little recording that we're doing, is that everything you say, type, or respond to somebody, you got to figure it's going to get shared. And, sometimes I swear I only open my mouth to change my feet, people will run with stuff, they'll even play with your words. Like just look at what goes on with the, in the news and that lately. So, but I think I'm being too gentle with it, to be frank with you, Mike. The reality of it is most people they're not afraid of the shareholders. They're just too damn lazy to call them back.
No,
Like
yeah.
that's it in a nutshell.
So I think in terms of foot and mouth problem, people are afraid of their words getting regurgitated. I think the way that I've always addressed this, and I've done in the past what passes as high profile criminal defense in our little state of Oregon, like big fish and little pond stuff that nobody would care about, in New York or LA or in the big cities in Nova Scotia. But what I've always told my attorneys and folks that work in public relations is if don't say it or put it in writing or speak it to anyone unless you want it on the front page of a paper. And if you have that as sort of your backdrop,
Yeah,
you can be very careful with your words. You can be very deliberate. And I got to say, looking at it from as an attorney who's advised a lot of folks in the public markets and dealing with our own public vehicle, there is a big fear factor of folks that aren't comfortable in saying things in the in quote unquote legal context. They're afraid of things being taken out of context, and they're afraid of having their words kind of thrown back in their face. So, as a
yeah,
best practice, I would think that having the IR team being very up to speed with what is publicly available, what was in the last MD&A, what is in the last Form 7 for the CSE, for instance, and what do the press releases say and what don't they say. Do you have any recommendations on how management confers with investor relations so everybody's up to speed? Like, what's the best practices there?
it's the best practices is just as going back to what you said, is just watch what the heck did you say. Like only stick with the stuff that's in the public domain. There's an awful lot of people out there, including I'm sure some institutions that they look to trap investor relations folks. Like they look for, did he, there's constantly, I probably deal with 100 people a week that are hoping I'm going to disclose something that I'm not supposed to. One of the things that I always take pride in is with any of the clients that I have is I tell them right off the start, do me a favor, don't share anything with me that's not already in the public domain, because then I don't have to worry about anything. Like
Okay, so there's a good practice right there, is to make sure management sequesters and firewalls off investor relations from intentions and sort of back office non publicly available material. That would be a good start, correct?
Yeah, it is. But the problem is a lot of the investor relations people out there are the writers of the company. So you end up being the person that's writing the actual press releases. So the little niche that I personally really enjoy, the reason our company deals with, shareholder communications and that is that we're not privy to writing the press releases. Like we purposely do not want anything that isn't already out there, because then I have nothing to worry about. All right.
Now, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see in investor relations?
Oh, the biggest pitfall going right now, number one, nothing else even comes close, is that they don't consider the retail component as its own individual fund. And they ignore it. So like you'll have a company, let's say for easy math, they got 100 million shares outstanding, and they'll say, well, our retail component's only 30 million of those, or only 33% of those shares. So they spend all their time playing around with 4 or 5 calls a month with their institutional holders, thinking they're more important. Well, if you have 100 million shares out and 30 million of them are all held by little tiny retail people, 10 or 15 years ago, it didn't make any difference, Mike. Like, and a lot of people would make the comment of, well, why do I spend so much time with this law guy in Eugene, Oregon? He only owns 500 shares of the company. But that one guy in Eugene, Oregon might be connected with $200 million worth of the company.
Or in modern times of social media, it's easy for folks to confer and theoretically come up with a voting block at a shareholder meeting.
Well, we had it happen, and I can't share the name of the company, but it was a NASDAQ company that had Oh God, it was a crazy high figure. They had like 150,000 retail shareholders, Mike. It was incredible. And so when we proposed to the company, hey, why don't you get us to reach out to all of your shareholders? We'll touch base with them. We'll give them updates. We'll answer some of their basic questions. And the CEO loved the idea of it. The CFO thought it was a complete waste of time. And I asked him, I said, do you mind me asking why? And he said, because five big New York institutions own 40% of the company. I don't, no offense, Sean, but I don't care about some shareholder somewhere that only owns $500 worth of the company. Why would I spend my time or hire you folks to reach out to that person when they can't affect us in the slightest? Well, something really crazy actually happened, Mike, is that those 150,000 shareholders were all connected on Telegram. They're all connected on WhatsApp, and they all got together at the AGM and voted against the board.
So real risk manifested in a real case study.
I'm telling you, it was incredible. It even surprised me. The AGM was over in 7 minutes because for the first time in history, the ants rule the world. And even if you look at it from the Cracker Barrel thing that just happened, right? Okay, the CEO may have come out with something that people didn't like. The stock started to go down, and that was not institutions that were causing that fall. Well, it might have been indirectly, but when you had all of these retail people, what scares the institutions more than anything is when they find out that their customers, their tiny little shareholders, are upset because they're the ones that hold all the power now. They really do. It's incredible, Mike. Like we've had conversations with people in Australia that we found out were really good friends with other shareholders in Finland and Poland and South Africa. Everybody is connected now. So the biggest pitfall in the history of the capital markets is not paying attention to the retail, because the ants control the world now. They really do.
So just the golden rule applies. Treat people like you want to be treated, right? So if you were a small holder of stock, how would you want to be treated? Well, obviously, I'd want to have a personal meeting with the CEO once a week. Obviously, that's not possible, so you can just do whatever is reasonable. Do you guys still nowadays do meetups and like pub meetings or anything up in Toronto when CEOs are in town?
It's funny you say that. I get CEOs quite often where they'll say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be in Boston for a week. Do you have any connections in Boston you can put me together with? And I always tell folks, instead of flying all around the world looking to garner interest in your stock, start with the customers and that you already have. Like you've got some of these public companies out there, like they might have 200,000 tiny retail shareholders. Well, if you want to increase some value in your company, you got to start with the people that you already got. You really do. I know it's a little bit self-serving because that's what our company does, but they're all connected now. Like a couple of years ago, I was talking to a fella from one of the companies. We were just updating the list. And it turns out he said he was actually in a wheelchair, Mike, and all he did all week was post on billboards for the 20 or 30 companies that he owned $500 each in. That was his job. All he did was post all over the darn world. So you get now does it make sense that the CEO should have to take time out of his or her day to keep calling that guy back? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that if somebody does reach out to the company, somebody somewhere should be getting back to these people. It doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO. That's silly. But somebody should be returning these people's calls and emails. And if you don't have the time to do it, hire somebody and give that person the job to do it, because you're missing the boat if you're not.
In terms of how to build a community, how to interact with long-term holders over time, what are your recommendations there?
Pick up the phone and call them. I can't be any more upfront or straight about it. It's when you call somebody and you say, "Hey, Mike, how you doing? It's Sean calling for Boeing. I'm just calling to touch base, see how you're doing." There's a lot of competition for shareholder dollars out there. You're listed as one of our shareholders, and we just wanted to call and see how you are and maybe get some feedback from you. And that stuff carries. Public companies now, they're reviewed like restaurants. They're reviewed like hotels. And if you wonder, and I'm only just learning this very recently, Mike. I'm blown away by it, to be honest with you. But where you have younger investors that all seem to run to Bitcoin, they all seem to run to tech, and everybody always said, oh well, you're never going to get them interested in defense, or you're not going to get them interested in mining because they're all into Bitcoin. They're not into Bitcoin because they're Bitcoin pros. They ran to Bitcoin because there was an incredible sense of community. There were thousands of online portals that they could go on, and they could talk about everything that they wanted to talk about. And it's that sense of community. If you don't have that now, you're done.
What's the best way to help shareholders have a sense of community with one another? Like, what sort of groups or what sort of applications are available for that? What do you recommend?
Funny you say that. It's not the company that has to build it. Chances are it's already out there. We had a client about a year ago. It was a big company. They were out of Australia. They had offices in London. They had offices in Ecuador, and we learned something in that process that was just unbelievable. They had, and I hope they don't shoot me for this, but they had a lot of shareholders. It was a very big shareholder list. And so when we started calling out to those folks saying, hey, just calling to update the list, see what folks are thinking of the company. And all of a sudden, I got invited to a Telegram group that was based in the UK, and it was eye-opening as can be. So we had 134 on average daily inbound calls and emails from retail shareholders from all over the world. Like they all wanted to get an update. They'd all said for years, the company's not communicating with us, da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, fast forward. I ended up becoming friends with a whole bunch of them. Right? That's generally, I'm a family business guy. Ended up becoming friends with a bunch of these folks in the UK. And they said, hey, if you're ever in the UK, like, when the heck am I going to the UK? But if you're ever in the UK, we should go to a pub. And it was one of the funniest experiences I ever had in my life, because all of a sudden I thought, you know what, I'm going to call the CEO. So I called the CEO and I said, hey, Scott, there's a private Telegram group of a whole bunch of shareholders in the UK, and they all want me to go to a pub. I said, why don't you come with me? Mike, we went, and we had 100 of them show up. We had 100 people that were all on the same Telegram page that had never met in person before. So it was one of the neatest experiences. You had all these people walking into a pub joking about, oh, you're Bonesaw, oh, you're Hangman, oh, you're Christy Pitts. The whole place was full of aliases. But when we started doing the walk around, and it wasn't going to be a pitch, I said to Scott, like, let's not put up a big stupid screen. Let's just interact with these people. Let's be human. Let's show them that we care about them long after we took their money. And it was an eye opener for me, like I couldn't even fathom. And when we did the math on it, we figured we had about, you ready for this? We had a little over 100 million in market cap in that pub, out of a 200 million market cap company.
Amazing.
And 100 million of it was in there. But they invited me. We didn't have to do anything fancy. All we had to do was find out, oh my God, this company has its own Telegram group, or this bunch of shareholders formed their own. They invited me to it. And that was the sense of community that they were looking for. And then we did something else that really worked like crazy. Anytime that the company was putting out a press release, and I'm not contradicting, right? But they put them out in the UK. So I tell the company, do me a favor. If you're going to put out a press release, tell me at least the night before, after market hours, so at least I know it's coming out. And I would set my alarm, Mike, to 3 o'clock in the morning Halifax time, so that I could be on that Telegram group the second that press release came out.
And what are you doing on the Telegram group? Are you monitoring, or are you participating?
Answering the questions about the press release. So the press release would come out. I would study the thing like crazy. And then I was able to answer all the questions, or at least if the questions I couldn't answer, I could say, you know what, it's a great question. I'll send that to our chief financial officer. Great question, but I need to get that to our COO. Great question, but that's a CEO level question. Let me see if I can get that answer. And then I was literally on WhatsApp on another thing saying, hey, Scott, I'm on this Telegram group. Somebody just answered me this question. Do you have an answer for it? And bang, I was able to right away give 223 people that were all on that Telegram group. They all felt like they were part of the company. It worked like crazy, not as a scheme, but because they felt part of the story. They felt part of the adventure, and that's what really, really, really works today. It's not baloney in people; it's letting them feel part of it.
It's not just feel part of it. I mean, they own the company, right? This is their adventure. What is a company but a manifestation of one person's idea? But who owns the idea, right? At some point, it's not a sole proprietorship. It's not just one person's vision. It should be with the great leaders, but you've got to take the pulse of your shareholders. And if the shareholders are wanting a different direction, you need to be able to communicate to them that they're wrong and this is the direction we're going and why. And
Sure.
they need to be able to disagree and talk back or sell. Or you can use that as a focus group and redirect the ship to some different adventures. And that's the real democratization of the public markets nowadays. It's not just somebody owning a piece of paper that's cordoned off in such and such community that can only wait once a year for a shareholder meeting. They can do this in real time. So do you advise like smaller cap companies, initial startups to create these communities on their own, like the Telegram groups, and invite people to it so they have a starting point to talk with one another?
I think it's a great idea, Mike, but I've never had it work. I've
What do you
tried
mean?
it. I've tried it with various companies where I've said, because they automatically think it's, I shouldn't say this because I have not had great success with that, where I created a WhatsApp thing or I created a Telegram thing, but maybe I just didn't put enough time into it. I'll tell you what I did wrong. I created the Telegram page for various companies. I've created a WhatsApp page the way you folks do as well. My mistake I made in it was I didn't communicate that to enough of the shareholders.
Okay, so create the opportunity, talk about it
Yeah,
often, and if they don't take you up on it, maybe they've already created one on their own and it's already
you
got
got it.
life to it, which would be just as
Yep,
good. I
yep.
hope they invite you to it so you can participate, right?
Yeah, and so far, all the ones in that I've been invited to, they've been unbelievably eye-opening, and I automatically assume that some of them are in there sort of as secret shoppers. Like it's the same sort of thing you and I talked about earlier. Is it's everything you say you got to figure is going to be recorded or whatever else. And I've had my Telegram responses shared around the world so many times now, right? Sean said this on our Telegram group. So it goes back to the same thing. You got to stay within the public domain, but there's nothing wrong with interacting and being human.
Well, I mean, I've been part of some Telegram groups, just observing companies as I've done market research. I don't think any on the Canadian side that I've seen, but I've seen some pink sheet companies where, and I've heard stories about some CSA trading companies that there's some real insider information going out there in those groups, and the people are on there for that reason. So I mean, I think that's the risk, and it's probably happening in real time, right? Because that's the worst thing I think can happen to a market is when people are trading information that the retail investors don't have, and I believe that is in part why they create these groups, because there's power when they combine their individual voices into a collective voice, and they can use that for mining information. So it
Yeah.
seems to be a good check and balance to a system that is all about information, right? We trade in information.
No, it's true. But I'll tell you something, Mike, for a public company executive like an insider to go on one of those billboards and try to leak out insider information in order to get some gain for the company, that's a special kind of stupid. Because if they ever throw the net, they throw it pretty darn wide. And
Well,
it wouldn't be very hard,
when I've seen it, it's like, oh, hey, big news coming up next week, or there's big news coming up on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Keep your eyes out. I mean, is that inside information? I think it clearly is, because it's
100%.
telling
Yeah.
people that there's going to be some good news. They're not saying, hey, bad news. They're saying, hey, there's going to be some good news, is what they're implying.
Yeah.
And I think the regulators just don't have enough time to look at it. And those people in the group are, I don't know, perhaps it's a known entity, but it's very reckless, very stupid, and very illegal.
Yeah, look at it's some people they just roll the dice. It's not a road that I go down. Like it's even in our own company, it's going to sound maybe Pollyannish or something, but even in our own little company, we named it Tufford Group for a reason. It was never a Trump thing. It was never an ego thing. It was an
Accountability.
integrity thing. I don't want to ever see my dad's name on Bloomberg or something that Tufford screwed around on a billboard. Like it's my name. I don't ever play with aliases. If you know what, it's you know, I don't always agree with everything Trump says, but there's one thing that he does say that I believe 100%. I run my life with it. If I got something to say to somebody, I go right to them. If I can't go right to them, I call them. Emails for wimps. You know, it's I don't hide behind masks. I don't hide behind an alias. If I'm on Twitter, it's my first name, it's my last name. If I'm on Telegram, it's my first name, it's my last name. You know, I don't muck around with the aliases. A relationship you gotta hide is probably one you shouldn't be in.
I mean, I do have some sympathy for the anonymous posters that are, they want to say something that's against the grain of popular culture and they can get burnt for it. So I don't fault them for that. I don't fault anybody really for playing around and with that sort of language. I mean, we're all grown ups, so we can
Sure.
take the heat and criticism. And you got to keep in mind that somewhere between 2.5% to 5% of any civilization, any society, have a personality disorder, and 100% of those people are online, and they tend to go together in certain groups,
Well said.
and
That's
and they're
great.
and they're not necessarily threats either, because they can be useful focus groups as naysayers. Imagine if there was a naysayer in the group during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, we definitely could have avoided the brinksmanship a little bit better. Like, you always need a naysayer, and I think these what people collectively refer to as trolls, they serve a useful purpose. They're, probably evolutionarily speaking, those were the guys that either got kicked out of the tribe or they were out exploring for new lands and came back either with great news or never returned. And I think those sort of genetic mutations that cause people to be an outlier, to be a naysayer,
Yeah.
there's an evolutionary reason for it. It gives you feedback. It's like an antivirus to groupthink, and it
Yeah.
provides a useful tool. And if folks have time to go to the bull boards and have a good sense of humor, laughing at themselves, they can also use that as a focus group to find out the frequently asked questions and address those accordingly.
Yeah. And I'm not being contradictory. I understand the alias, but where I make my living working with shareholder lists, it's just not a game that I can play. Like I'd rather be able to stay. I get it. I get it. You know,
Well, I'm
there's
talking
value.
aliases from people without power, like leaders
Agreed. Yeah.
and leaders and people in companies. I should never, they should be able to say anything backed by their name. But the little
Yeah.
guys out there that could get trampled by the big guys, yeah, they have a right to speak. I mean, hell, America was founded on pseudonyms.
It's true.
A lot of the original political papers were written by great
Yeah.
men that we know in the history books that weren't naming themselves back then. So yeah, I think as far as like tips for the market in general, tips for retail investors, like how would you suggest that they best communicate? I mean, of course, they're going to pick the channel, and the company should be involved in the WhatsApp group, Signal, perhaps on the bull boards. They should have maybe a chat available or a text message, email, phone number, all those things. But what is the best way to communicate and to get their answers, and as well as communicate any concerns?
I'd say having a dedicated person just for the retail. I think every company should be doing that right now. I really do, because we get feedback from millions of outreaches that our company does, and when the number one feedback, sorry, it just changed. The number one feedback now is, you ready for crazy, Mike? Are you a robot?
Huh.
That's the number one thing we get now is, are you a robot? It's a scream. The number two is, nobody ever returns my calls or my emails.
The number one complaint against lawyers are to the bar?
What's that?
Well, it used to be it doesn't return my phone calls, but nowadays it doesn't return my text, emails, and phone calls. I mean, that's the number one. That's the
Yeah.
number one complaint, and which is pretty horrible in a fiduciary relationship. I always use the attorney metaphor because I think it so well translates to a public market. If you look at everybody sort of a paternalistic fiduciary relationship, you owe them information, and if time or resources are such that you can't, other than replying back that stay tuned for the press releases. If there's an active company with a budget, yeah, they should have a dedicated person. How would you recommend management schedule these phone calls? Is it, should they have a Calendly link, that they have a standing appointment, or once a week they make outreach calls, or a couple times a week IR is making the outreach calls and scheduling it for the management representative? What's the best practice?
Well, it's number one, management teams should be doing whatever they can do to build real value in the company. So shareholders have got to realize these folks need to have time to actually go out and build something, because the one thing you'll never ever hear me say is a company is undervalued. You won't hear me say undervalued. You won't hear me say overvalued, because you're very specifically valued at the close of every day. Anything else you say is baloney. Like, you want to know what you're valued at? Wait till the close. That's what you're valued at. All right. But I think if I were working for a company right now in investor relations, I would very seriously have a weekly time where I am 100% available. And maybe it's an online thing that they can, either dial into, or it's a chat or something like that, where I can say, you know what, folks, we have a business to run here. We got stuff that we have to do. We got milestones we're trying to hit. But I'll tell you what, every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, at whatever time zone it is, I will be 100% available for 1 hour, and bring your stuff. And,
well, do you recommend doing one-offs or group meetings, or what's the best way so people, I guess if the company's small enough, are one-on-ones the best, or what do you recommend?
My friend, it's that's entirely up to the shareholder. Some shareholders don't want to put all of their information out on something. They're super introverts. Name your cliche. That's I would make it available to, sort of like at the grocery stores now, like 2 hours a week at the grocery store down the street from my house, they dim all the lights. Like, yeah, you got to sort of be flexible to what your shareholders want, right? But it's I really think where companies, especially larger ones, are missing the boat is they don't have a dedicated retail IR person now, and it's needed badly, really badly. Not because I got an opinion on it, but because our company makes outreaches, and especially the younger investors. Like, people going back to the Bitcoin thing, kids ran to Bitcoin because there was that sense of community. And one thing almost all kids have in common now, and it's not a knock on parents. Parents are busy, but a lot of kids feel discarded by adults. So we wonder why they ran to Bitcoin. They ran to Bitcoin because they never felt alone, especially the kids that were locked down in Canada for a couple of years. These are kids that are, these are our investors now. And they are drawn to these community places, good, bad, whatever, right? But I really think that's what companies should be doing now. They should have a dedicated, call it a fluffy person, call it whatever you want, but somebody that no matter what, the younger shareholders or the newer shareholders can have a dedicated time to get a hold of them, because I think it would pay huge dividends, instead of just avoiding them. This is going to sound a little bad, all right? But I got to sit on a panel about a year ago with 5 very serious investor relations people. And when they started the panel, they went along the thing, and they said, well, tell me what investor relations is to you. And they all had beautiful MBA lawyer sounding answers. When it got to me, I just said, it's showing your customers you care about them after they gave you their money. And very few companies do that well. And it was funny, because out of the 5 people that were in that panel, 2 of them in their opening remarks literally said, I don't always have time to call you back. So that's saying I don't have the time. So you know what? Hold it a second. You're a $2 billion company. Hire somebody that makes the damn time. Because if 40% of your shareholders are retail, why in the hell are you finding it a sport to not call them back? Because you're not dealing with one person anymore. If 40% of your shareholders out there are retail, and they're all connected on social media, you better start considering that 40% as one big fund and treat it as such, because they can obliterate you at the AGM. We watched it happen.
No, that's a good lesson. So a couple of the biggest takeaways are one, the golden rule, treat these investors like you'd want to be treated. Make time for it. If you've got, if you're particularly a larger company with the budget allows for it,
Yeah.
try to hire somebody that specializes in that. And if you don't have it in the budget, try to at least set up some time
You got it.
to do it, as time permits. And then,
Yeah.
one of the biggest takeaways would be to treat the collective block of retail investors as a fund. Treat them as a unit, as an entity, and address them accordingly, and give them the respect that block deserves.
And there's no doubt I love that stat that you gave. Out of a certain amount of people out there, some of them are complete nut jobs, and a lot of them invest in companies. And I made it a bit of a sport with one of our clients a little while back, that all of a sudden I realized that one tiny little angry shareholder was like 5 different aliases on the same billboard. And it was funny when I finally, and I made it this is going to sound a little creepy. I made it my life's goal to find out who this person was for real. And I found him working at a guano, like bat poop, factory in friggin' Australia. And I found him. Like, you couldn't make it up. I finally found him at a guano factory. They were making fertilizer. And I called the guy. And I said, is this so-and-so? And he goes, yeah, who are you? And I listed his aliases. It was like I threw holy water on a vampire.
Well, I mean, I guess that's the epitome of batshit crazy. Yeah. Well, I want to just ask a couple final questions for you about messaging, and
Sure.
I want to really think about sort of the highly charged political environment that we have nowadays, and how us as Born Defense are entering this market. And a lot of us have worldviews, let's say, that are more niche oriented, that you can please some of the people all the time and all the people none of the time. And there's going to be folks that don't agree with the worldview. Do you recommend that companies keep those worldviews that I believe are very relevant to the sector they're in? For instance, let's talk about mining in general. If you have a worldview that promotes the exploration or exploitation of lands, then obviously that's relevant to the mining industry. And if you have a political bent that think that these particular areas shouldn't be open and they should be natural open spaces, and that seems like the public should know that, and you should be able to defend your position and be open to criticism and conversation. And I think in terms of the defense space in general, this is very political. It's about an industry that a lot of retail investors have been sitting on the sidelines all these years because they find it distasteful that the military industrial complex is a war machine that's number one product. Well, you can always tell what the purpose of a system is by what it produces. If a system produces a never-ending war, then that's the product and that's the purpose of the system. So a lot of folks find it abhorrent to invest in a company. And a lot of folks would want to invest in a company that wants to get their goods and services into the market, which would be supportive of not a company peace through strength, but just perpetuating that endless cycle of violence. How do you recommend highly charged individuals with opinions address these issues? Because a lot of folks in these sorts of deals have opinions, and they aren't shy of sharing it. Should they share it? Should they be silent? What do you recommend?
Well, I'll tell you, I can see the good in everybody. I try. I made it. It's a purposeful thing. Call it a spiritual thing. It's not a religious thing, but like I look for light no matter how small the crack. So it's I can see good in Trump. I can see good in Barack Obama. It's just I try. It's the way I'm wired. Right? Obama had a great line. Somebody gave him this great big long crazy question. It was baited. It was this. It was that. And his answer I thought was brilliant. He sighed and he said, "People are messy." I love that answer. People are messy. If you have a public company though, and you've got a fiduciary duty to the shareholders, I always look at it as in sales. 1 in 10 people will say yes to everything, and 1 in 10 people will say no to everything. So I'd be concentrating my efforts on the one given. And if you can get 2 more out of 10, you're going to the Hall of Fame in baseball. That's a 300 average. It's fighters want one thing. They want to fight. If half the population is interested in security and defense, I'd be chasing that half. I wouldn't go try to flip. You're not going to change a vegetarian. Bacon, maybe. It'll flip a couple of them. But like, there's no sense arguing with all the vegetarians. They've already made up their darn mind. From a mining standpoint, there's the Denver School of Mines has a great line. They said, if you can't grow it, you got to mine it. It's that simple. And I'm not against EVs. I'm not against the green thing. I think it's fantastic. But from a mining point of view, I think you could give every person on Earth a dirty diesel car, and you're never going to come close to what we're going to do to the planet to try to electrify it. Only 1 out of 10,000 projects ever become a mine, and we apparently need 10,000 new copper mines just to keep up with the demand that we've got going now. So that's 10,000 times 10,000. I don't see the green in that. Am I against it? No, because I think, you know what, the world's getting better. I see a return to some common sense all over the place. But my mother was raised Italian. The best advice she ever gave me was, Sean, don't argue with crazy people. That's the best advice I give.
Well, I think going forward, in any controversial landscape, in a sector like defense or mining or anything that will have detractors, the goal is just to speak the truth, say what's on your mind, say what your values are and what you believe in. And every deal needs to have buyers and sellers and holders. Yeah. And if the ask and the bid don't meet, then you don't have any liquidity. And so it's important that folks that don't agree with your worldview, that they have a chance to learn it, and you have a chance to try to change their mind, or they have an opportunity to sell, or they can hold and badmouth you in the bull boards and see if they can change your mind. And I think we're in a state of affairs where speech is risky. They got cancel culture. You've got devastation with political violence, and you have people that are afraid to make a stand. And I think with the way communication's going, community building's going, and sort of the lack of spine that a lot of folks have in every sector and every walk of life, it's just time to speak not your truth or my truth, but what you perceive as reality. What is the truth? Said. And then if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, please tell me, convince me otherwise. Yeah. Because what, like you're saying, Sean, when you see the good in everybody, even those folks that are angry and flaming all the time, they do have some good ideas. They do know some things, and if you can take a deep breath and not react to them with anger, maybe you'll get the little kernel of value, the little kernel of light that they have that can improve a conversation. But overall, Sean, I really appreciate your time here. I know you're a busy man. You're advising on a lot of deals, and you're always on crazy adventures every time I have a chance to talk to you. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
No, likewise, Mike. You've always been a gentleman. Like I say, you've got that it factor that people want to work with you, and I'm honored to spend some time with you today. And whatever I can do to help you moving forward, you got me. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
You have a great day.